Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Wednesday's edition, Thanksgiving Eve, broadcasting from our studios here in Southern California. Happy to have you with us today. And you know what, folks? Even though it's a beautiful day and it's a holiday weekend, the politics never stops. So, incoming, hopefully, Speaker Kevin McCarthy has announced that Department of Homeland Security head Alejandro Mayorkis, who we have widely criticized over the past year for how he has handled the border situation, he's basically calling for Mayorkis' head, asking him to resign, or if he doesn't resign, he'll face an impeachment hearing. Now, what does that mean? Well, Mayorkis has already said he's not going to resign. One thing about this guy, he's a clever lawyer. He knows how the laws are written as is, and basically this guy is a hardcore leftist for open borders and for wide open immigration, unlimited immigration. That's who this guy is. So hopeful incoming Speaker Kevin McCarthy, he's demanded that we take action to secure our southern border. He's actually going to hold hearings at the southern border to draw attention. And he's demanding that Secretary Mayorkis resign. Why? Because he misrepresented the status of what's happening at the border in testimony to Congress. The border is not secure. We agree 100% it's not secure. So, what are the ramifications? Well, if he does not resign, he's likely to be impeached by the new Congress. Now, again, it's not going to be an easy task because, again, you can be impeached in the House of Representatives. They'll send it to the Senate for trial. The likelihood is you're not going to have Democrats vote to convict this guy. However, it will bring attention to something we've been talking about ever since day one of the Biden administration. Think about this, folks. He's been president for 2 years, and we've had over 4 million people cross that border. No telling how many of them have gotten through and are staying in the country. And Mayorkis is the poster of incompetence at the DHS. And they're deliberately trying to let as many people in as possible. They don't enforce the border. I've said all along, I think their strategy is to try to flood what I call flood the zone. Have as many illegals come into the country as possible, trying to force the Republicans in the Senate to agree to an amnesty plan. They're never going to do that. And Democrats, if you think about this, again, they've controlled the House for 2 years. They controlled the Senate. So they had every opportunity to do something, and they didn't do it. Now, why? Because they knew they weren't going to get 60 votes from Republicans. Nonetheless, when Donald Trump was president, we saw that border, while not totally secure, was a heck of a lot better than it has been under Biden. He basically opened the floodgates. Mayorkis has overseen it, and McCarthy, assuming he's Speaker, is going to have hearings on this. And Mayorkis has testified before Congress numerous times. You heard him. He said, yeah, our border's secured. No, it's not. The agents in the field laugh at the guy. But don't count him out. He's an experienced lawyer and he knows what he can and cannot say within what the law says. And there are some tricky phases to the law Congress currently has in place related to the border and asylum and what agents can and cannot do. It is not an easy task and it's not slam dunk. We'll see how this plays itself out once we have a new Congress in place. But again, what's one of the issues we talked about for a long time? The border, the border, the border. So, as we head into Thanksgiving weekend, that's one hot topic. Second hot topic. You could see this one coming a mile away. Once the federal courts put a halt to Biden's illegal student loan forgiveness program, he had previously said that the student loan payment deferments, which under the excuse of COVID, were going to end December 31st. Well, Ron Klain, the chief of staff, or the other far left-wing advisors in that White House basically dragged Biden out and said, no, you got to extend it further so that we can give the court time to review the issue. What do? The Anita Dunns in the world, the Susan Rices, the Ron Klains. They extend the moratorium on payments to June 30th of 2023, basically using COVID as an excuse while the Supreme Court decides on the administration's emergency request to hear the case. Folks, this is a blatant abuse of unauthorized power the president does not have. Congress has the power of the purse strings, not the president. And think about this, okay? You had a Democratic Congress. You still do up until January 3rd. You had a Democratic-controlled Senate. It was a budget item. They actually could have passed a bill in the House, sent it to the Senate, and passed it on a reconciliation basis, but they didn't do it. Why? Because they wanted the issue. It's crystal clear. This was rolled out a couple months prior to the election because, politically speaking, they wanted to get young people to vote for them. Boy, did that strategy work. And the Democrats ran on that policy. They pounded it on the table months before the election. And to nobody's surprise, they got a good chunk of the young voters. Enough to where their losses in the congressional races weren't as bad. We'll get into that in a little bit. But again, that was a big deal. And Biden, again, had previously promised that the deferments would end December 31st. Folks, this is a terrible policy. It's basically an act of socialism, giving relief not approved by Congress, but by the president. And the courts rightfully stopped it. I hope the Supreme Court, when they review the case, will find that the president does not have the constitutional authority to simply erase debt. You know, people went out, they voluntarily borrowed the money for their college education, knowing they would have to pay it back. And now here, a few months before the midterm election, the Biden administration rolls out a debt cancellation policy. Well, you know, if you got student debt, of course you're going to want it forgiven. Who wouldn't? It's not right. It's un-American. It's illegal. But that doesn't stop Democrats. Never has, never will. It was really interesting. You know, I had to see a medical doctor yesterday, and while I was going through a procedure, he said, yeah, whatever happened on that student debt thing? I said, you didn't hear the news? He goes, no. He says, I've got student debt still. I said, what was the news? I said, well, the administration deferred payments until June 30. He goes, I thought it was going to end at the end of the year. I go, it was, but the administration's deferred it. And he's like, wow, I get a break. And here's a guy, again, not naming names, but just as an example, a medical doctor, still having student loans. Not unusual, but here's someone who readily has the ability to pay them. And now the Biden administration is deferring it. Folks, here they're deferring it on a lot of people. They're using this thing saying, well, it's $10,000 on this, $20,000 on that, your maximum income is this. Look, folks, if you're making $125,000 a year, you can afford to pay your $10,000 student loan. This is just a blatant Democratic giveaway to try to shore up a base of voters. And I hate to admit it, but it worked, in the midterm elections. Now, will the Supreme Court strike it down? I hope so. If not, you're going to have a lot more of this garbage going on, not only with Biden, but with future presidents. Now, that's issue number 2. So, the border, a disaster, not getting any better, but we're going to try to fix it. Student loan, that's in the courts right now. Let's talk about a third thing, okay? And you're not hearing this in the media a whole lot now. Did you notice once we hit 218 in number of seats in Congress, where it showed that Republicans would take control, all these other races are hardly getting any media coverage at all. First, you had the situation where Lauren Boebert's race in Colorado, her opponents conceded by state law because the election was so close, within 500 votes or so, it had to go to a mandatory recount. That's state law. I guess in Colorado, they follow what their state laws are, and we'll get into why Georgia doesn't in a minute. But her opponents already conceded, so that brought them to 219. They won another seat in California. That put them at 220. And just yesterday, Kevin Kiley, he won a U.S. House of Representatives seat in California for the U.S. House of Representatives. And that pushes our margin now in the House 221 to 213. There's one seat left to be determined, and that's a California seat. And the interesting thing about that seat is this, folks. 99% of the vote is in, okay? And the Republican candidate's up by like 600 votes. So the likelihood is the final margin, as we said earlier in the week on the show, is going to be 222 Republicans, 213 Democrats. That's plus 9. Well, that's more than all the American media, far left-wing radical media, basically said on election night. A lot of them were saying, well, this is going to be 218, 217, or 219, 216. NBC News had 219, 216. So now that the Republicans are winning more of these tight races, one in Colorado, and it looks like 4 in California, you're not hearing much about it. But the fact is, if we're sitting here, bear in mind there's 435 House seats. If we're sitting here at 222 to 213, that's a plus 9. That's slightly higher margin than the Democrats had. Democrats were 215, 210. Now, because of some people retiring, a death of a Republican in a terrible car crash, the lead widened a little bit. But on election day, I mean, when that Congress, the last Congress was convened, it was 220, 215. So Republicans actually, by the time all the counting is done, will have a plus 9. So they went from -5 to plus 9. You could argue, it wasn't as good as they had hoped, but it's still a solid lead. 222 to 213 is a heck of a lot better than 218, 217 or 219, 216. At least you got a little bit of wiggle room in there. So by the time we do the show next week, we are expecting that the remaining race will be called, and that's how the final count's going to end up being. 222 for Republicans, 213 for Democrats, a plus 9 in the House of Representatives. Now, in the Senate side, we're not going to know until December the 6th. That's the night of the Raphael Warnock-Herschel Walker race. Warnock's currently up, and there's only been one poll I've seen on it, so I'm hesitant to read anything in the polls, but it looks like Warnock's up slightly on that. We'll see. Now, fourth key piece of news. Oh, I tell you what, right by Thanksgiving, I didn't think we were going to get this much, but boy, there's been a ton come out. The United States Supreme Court has ruled that former President Trump must turn over his tax returns to House committees. This is a pretty big deal, folks. Trump has gone out of his way to hide those tax returns from the minute he started to run for president. There are rumors out there that these returns show significant losses. We'll see. You know that once the House gets them, they're going to get leaked. Would you want your tax returns leaked to a House committee? I wouldn't. Most people wouldn't. But I guess, a lot of people running for office have to show them. But Trump didn't want to do that. Respecting his right to privacy. But now the Supreme Court has said he has to turn them over to House committee. He doesn't have any more legal outlets to go. The Supreme Court's as high as it gets. So that's going to be coming out sometime, over the holidays. Fifth big piece of news. My God, I got to tell you, it never stops. CBS News, and again, we haven't spent a whole lot of time on this story, but you're going to hear more about it. CBS News has now confirmed, the Hunter Biden laptop, it's a real story. They've covered it up, folks, for 2 years. None of the mainstream media wanted to even touch it prior to the election. But the repair guy who did the repair work on the laptop, he said he was intimidated by the FBI, threatened. Imagine that. This guy's repairing computers, he gets threatened by the FBI. I got a funny feeling that this is going to be one of those investigations that the House was promising. You're Probably going to hear a lot about this come January and February of 2023. We'll see. We're not going to judge anything on this thing, but we do know the story was covered up for a couple years. So let's see where the facts are once we get all the information. And again, unfortunately, our next story, my God, sick story. We just talked the other day, about the horrific killing took place up in Moscow, Idaho. We had another one last night. A Walmart employee goes into a Walmart, kills 6 people in the break room in Virginia. Then the gunman turned around and pulled the trigger on himself, killed himself. Just a senseless, horrible, right before Thanksgiving, 6 people will now no longer be with their families. Just a horrific story. And it happened last night. And it's still too early. Police are investigating it. But apparently the trigger man was an employee of Walmart. Who knows what happened, but we'll learn more about that over the coming days. But another horrific mass shooting, here in the United States, and it happened at a Walmart. So, we mentioned the Idaho situation. Investigators haven't released a whole lot of information, and we still don't know who the killer was in that. Boy, that was a horrific murder scene, just terrible. So, again, our condolences go out to those families, both of the Walmart employees and of those students who were up in Moscow, Idaho. So, again, we hate bringing it, but it is in the news. And then, another big story, on the business side that's come out here. You've heard about the crypto boy down in the Bahamas, how, billions and billions of dollars are missing. That's the FTX case. It's basically a fraud case. It was a Ponzi scheme, but apparently it's worse than a Ponzi scheme. The current management team and the law firm that was brought in to try to reconstruct this thing said there are substantial assets either missing or stolen. No surprise here. This guy, Bankman-Fried, he didn't even have a CPA keeping an eye on the books. This place was run like a commune. Billions of dollars all around the world. This is the second or third biggest crypto clearing firm. 1 million customers. And it looks like he just used this as a piggy bank. Money stolen, missing. Friedman took out hundreds of millions of dollars, gave it to his sister companies. This is just a complete debacle, folks. And this is going to go on for years. Because, they have to sort out who's owed what money, where did the money go? What was Bankman-Fried's role in this? How was funds diverted? There's different countries involved because money came into this from all over the world. So, again, I'm telling you folks, this is tip of the iceberg. You're going to see this is a massive, massive fraud. The people that had money invested in this are likely to get pennies on the dollar, if anything, back. Now, is this evidence of fraud all over crypto land? I don't know if you can go that far or not, but boy, I got to tell you, there were some sophisticated investors that got duped, and there were some gullible ones that got duped. And it'll all be sorted out. Right now, you're only in the civil piece of it, but this guy, Bankman-Fried's going to be facing lawsuits for years and likely criminal prosecution. We'll follow the story for you. And on the good news front, I got to shift from bad to good here. Elon Musk I remember that day he walked into the Twitter headquarters bringing a kitchen sink in there. If that was any indication, cleaning up everything, including the kitchen sink, I don't know what was. Musk is literally, I actually wasn't sure this was a real story, but apparently it is. He's found closets full of "Stay Woke" t-shirts at Twitter. You can't make this stuff up. I thought it was a fake story at first, but apparently not. I got to tell you, folks, that Twitter thing was a cesspool of liberal whack jobs. And it is so good that, all these clowns are being cleared out, that the public square can now have, opinions on both sides. We told you it was going to happen. All the far left-wing radical kooks, they'll probably leave Twitter, go to other platforms. You're already seeing it. No surprise. But it just goes to show you how far left-wing radical that platform was, and all the lunatic liberals that just spewed garbage out over that platform for a long time, 5, 6, 7 years worth of that crap. So good for Musk. Hopefully he can turn that business around. My guess is what these liberals always do. They'll, now that you beat them at their own game, the crybabies are going to leave the platform and they'll go somewhere else. I couldn't care less. The less garbage we hear spewing out of these liberals' mouths, the better. Because again, you hear the word snowflake, pampered. Oh man, I gotta cry up. I heard somebody said something that hurt my feelings. Oh my gosh, the world's coming in. Who cares? Good for Musk. I hope he turns it around. Now, in some international news that broke, I don't know if you saw the pictures or not, but boy, there's some violent protests taking place in China. They have Foxconn's a factory that produces a lot of the electronics that are used in iPhones and other devices. Massive factories over there in China. And workers apparently were promised some raises and they didn't get them. There's pictures of COVID lockdown policies in China, workers being beaten. People, these Chinese authorities, hundreds of them in hazmat suits, those big white hazmat suits. COVID is becoming a real problem in China, folks. I mean, big time problem. And China's got this zero COVID policy. How the heck they're going to make that work, I don't know. I mean, if the answer is they really should be using some of the drugs that were formed in the West, but they're not. So again, it's not really good PR for Apple showing Chinese factories that produce iPhones having people in hazmat suits beating workers, as this COVID lockdown practice continues. So, be aware of it, folks. I mean, crazy stuff that happened here is happening in China now. Do you remember all the lockdowns we had here? Oh my God. Thank goodness for Ron DeSantis, Brian Kemp in Georgia opening their states. Oh, think about that. And in other economic news, this isn't great, but it's not, I don't want to alarm you too much. Jobless claims hit 240,000. That's the highest level since August, folks, but that's still a low number, okay? We have unemployment in this country still below 4%. That's a good number. So we're not going to get the employment numbers, for November act until the first Friday of December, so a little ways away. But you are hearing notes, particularly in technology companies, of layoffs coming. I mean, Hewlett-Packard just announced that they're going to lay off 6,000 workers over the next couple of years. So, question is the economy headed towards a soft landing? Well, a lot of people think so. Some people say no landing at all. Say the economy, the fears of recession are overblown. The economy is going to hum along. We're going to have a good 2023. Others are saying we're going to have a hard landing. I don't know. I don't think the effect of the interest rate increases have really filtered through yet. The Federal Reserve has clearly signaled that the days of 75 basis point increases are over. The market is now anticipating at the December meeting a 50 basis point increase. So while we had 4 consecutive 75 basis point increases, the December meeting is likely to yield a 50 basis point, and then the Fed will analyze it from there to see how those interest rate hikes are affecting the economy. Because they have a dual mandate: stable prices and low unemployment. Well, they've hit the low unemployment goal, but stable prices, no way. You still have inflation running north of 7%. So will the final terminal rate be closer to 5, 4 3/4? We'll see. But right now, Wall Street is expecting a 50 basis point increase in December, and then at max, 2 or 3 25 basis points increasing at the first 2 or 3 meetings of 2023. A significant slowdown in rate increases. The question you have to ask yourself is, how will this affect the economy going forward in 2023? Look, certain indicators say this economy is doing just fine. Unemployment rate's low, under 4, we talked about it. Look at the travel going on over Thanksgiving. 55 million people expected to travel. Airports are packed, roads are packed. Folks, last night, oh my gosh, you saw horrific scenes on television of miles of traffic jams on the 5 and 405 freeway here in Southern California. So people are traveling, the consumer's spending money. Question is, will these higher interest rates affect the slowdown? Clearly in 2 areas, technology it is, and it appeared so in real estate, but we got interesting real estate numbers this morning too. New home sales were up about 7% when economists had forecast a 5% decline. That's a big swing. So a lot of that happened in the Northeast. New home builders, they reduced some prices, but you can get right now a 30-year fixed rate mortgage is around 6.75%. About a month ago, it topped out over 7. So we'll see. Supposedly the real estate market is going to be affected. It is being affected, but maybe not to the degree a lot of people thought. You are seeing home prices come down, but the people most affected are your first-time and your low-end buyers because the increased interest rates have a greater effect on them. We'll keep an eye on it as we go through the holiday season. So, again, hit you with a lot of news today, folks. But that's the way it is. We got to share it with you, what's really going on here. And most important of all, we want everybody to travel safe, and we want it for those of you visiting family or friends or just going to watch a little bit of football over Thanksgiving. We wish everyone a happy holiday and happy Thanksgiving in this great time of year. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening today. We will be back next week. Have a great holiday weekend. See you on Monday.